Why the NBA is terrified of the Cleveland Cavaliers. So far this season, the Cavs have been playing a very high level of NBA basketball. There even was a period where a lot of their significant players were out with injuries, but instead of losing a bunch of games, the Cavs did a really nice job at steadying ship and playing really well, and ever since all their main guys came back to the roster, the Cavs have been playing at another level, and currently at this point, they're the hottest team in the NBA, and a lot of fans are extremely excited to see what this team could do once it comes down to playoff time. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicySports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since the Cavs acquired Donovan Mitchell, they were seen as a real threat in the Eastern Conference. They were seen as a threat right away. Teams definitely thought the Cavs could make it to the playoffs and make it far, but also at the same time, when you looked at the Cavs' extremely young roster, it was pretty clear that these guys could be really good in the long-term future as well, and only continue to get better as the years did progress. So there definitely was a lot of fear when teams thought about this Cleveland Cavaliers team. And although they did play pretty well during the regular season, once it came down to playoff time, they significantly underperformed expectations, as they ended up losing to the New York Knicks in the first round. And when you actually watch that series back, it was pretty clear that the Cavs just couldn't get anything going. A lot of their main guys just weren't playing well whatsoever offensively, and due to that, their offense just wasn't able to get going really in any of the games they played in. And defensively, they definitely did play relatively well at times, but for the most part, it was pretty clear that they got dominated by the New York Knicks. And after that extremely poor performance in the first round, many fans and many different teams around the NBA saw the Cavs in a completely different light. Because although their roster definitely was extremely talented, you talk about a roster that has Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, a bunch of other guys, nice young players on the roster as well. Obviously, there's a lot of potential for this team, but after they performed like they did in the playoffs versus the New York Knicks, it was pretty clear that this team was just not ready to be all that good, at least right now. And due to that, going into this season, teams and fans had very different expectations for this roster. Obviously, they still had a lot of talent, so people definitely expected them to make the playoffs once again, but once it came down to playoff time, people just didn't necessarily know what they can expect from this team. But so far into the season, the Cavs have definitely done a phenomenal job at playing extremely well, significantly better than they've played last year. Because when you look currently at this point, the Cavs are the hottest team in the NBA. Obviously, they have all their stars back at this point, and everybody's playing at a really high level, but even when you look at the catalyst for when this hot streak really started, it was when a lot of their guys were hurt, and the Cavs were doing a great job at still staying afloat at that point. And when all their stars came back, it was just an extra jolt to help them play even better, and at this point, it's pretty clear that everything is just rolling on all cylinders for this Cavaliers roster. Their offense is playing at a really high level, their defense is playing at a really high level, they're rebounding very effectively, their chemistry is at a great point, a lot of their guys are shooting very efficiently, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, you name it, they're all playing extremely well on this roster, and it's just pretty clear that when this Cavs team is clicking on all cylinders, it's very difficult to stop them, and especially once it comes down to playoff time, it would be very difficult to stop this Cavs roster if they're playing at a similar level to what they're doing right now. But a question that some of you may be having at this point is, why do I think the NBA is terrified of this Cavs roster? Well, the first factor I want to touch upon is the overall talent they have on the roster. Because when you look at this Cavs team, it's pretty clear both in the starting lineup but also in their bench unit, they just have a lot of younger players that are very talented guys and only are going to get better with time. Because when you talk about a roster that has Donovan Mitchell, who's capable of putting up 35 plus on any given night, you talk about Darius Garland, who can score with the best of him but also facilitate at a really high level, Jared Allen, a great rebounder and a great defender and definitely is pretty effective offensively, Evan Mobley, also very similar, very effective offensively, does pretty well defensively, can rebound, and you talk about other guys, supplementary guys they have in this roster like Max Strus, who can hit the 3-point jump shot with the best of him. You talk about Caris LeVert, who does a great job at scoring for himself individually. Isaac Okoro, really good defender and can spread the court out at times. You just talk about a roster that's littered with talent from top to bottom. Of course, at the top, they have their star in Donovan Mitchell, and he's a guy who can definitely carry them throughout the playoffs. But even besides him, they have guys that complement him very effectively, and even off the bench, they have guys that have the capability to score for themselves at a really high level, like for example, Caris LeVert. So I definitely think when you look at the overall talent on this roster, it's very high, and it definitely is something that terrifies the rest of the NBA in the regular season, of course, but especially once it comes down to playoff time. Because if a lot of those guys can really get it going in a particular playoff series, the Cavs are going to be one of the more dangerous and one of the more difficult teams to beat in the Eastern Conference and really in the NBA as a whole. But the next factor that I want to touch upon for why I think the rest of the NBA is terrified of this Cavs roster is due to how well the Cavs have been playing on this recent hot stretch. Because when you look at the Cavs roster, although I did mention before that they have a ton of talent on the roster, that doesn't guarantee success. And a perfect example of that is actually when you looked at the Cavs last year. They had a very similar roster last year to what they do this year, and of course they weren't able to be successful really whatsoever in the playoffs last year. But I think this year is a little bit different than last year in the sense that the Cavs have definitely shown a better chemistry and an ability to play really well together on both ends, both offensively and defensively. And if you're talking about a Cavs roster that has the capability of putting everything together, which is exactly what they've been showing on this recent hot stretch, I just think that within itself is definitely something that's very dangerous and very scary to the rest of the NBA. Because obviously if you have a roster that's as talented as this Cavs roster is, but on top of that they figure things out, their offense is running really effectively, their defense is running really effectively, their chemistry is on point, obviously that's going to be a difficult team to defeat, really at any point in the regular season, but especially once it comes down to playoff time. I definitely do see this Cavs team as a very dangerous team in the Eastern Conference and a team that definitely has the potential to compete for an NBA championship this year. So there definitely is a lot to get excited about with this Cavs roster. Of course, they have all the talent in the world, whether you talk about their starting lineup, whether you talk about their bench unit. Of course, they have been playing extremely well on this recent hot stretch, both offensively, both defensively, and they're really showing what they could potentially be in the playoffs and also in the future as a whole. But with all that being said, of course, they have yet to answer the biggest question that most people have. Of course, they are playing extremely well during the regular season. They're playing well offensively, defensively, their chemistry is great, and all that is definitely great, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to a team like this is playoff success. And with the way the Cavs performed last year in the playoffs, obviously there's going to be a ton of questions on whether or not this team could legitimately compete once it comes down to playoff time. So for the Cavs, I think it's extremely important for them to do a couple different things between now and once it comes down to playoff time. I think the first and most obvious thing is this Cavs roster needs to stay healthy. If they are able to stay healthy, they definitely could have a lot of success this year, and this year could definitely end up being very successful for them. But besides that factor, I think they need to do a nice job at utilizing a lot of the success they're having during the regular season and carry it over into the postseason. If the Cavs are able to do that, I definitely do think they're going to be able to have a lot more success this year than they did last year, and they could even look like a completely different team. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening for this Cavs team, but I will say I am extremely excited. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the rest of the NBA should be terrified of the Cavs, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.